How's it going, people? Many of us lust after those beautiful V12 cars we see doing 5 miles per hour around Mayfair in London, but the vast majority of us can't quite afford cars with that many cylinders. However, in this video I'm going to be talking you through the top 5 cheapest cars you can buy with those highly sought after 12-cylinder engines in order from least to most powerful. This leads me on perfectly to the topic of the week this week, which is, in general, which engine sounds best? A V6, a V8, a V10 or a V12? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below and we'll have a chat about it. Remember that I make these videos from the UK market perspective, so prices in other countries may differ, and remember that whenever you buy a second-hand car, particularly a high-performance one, maintenance, repairs, tax and insurance are super important factors to consider, but I'll reference those where I can throughout the video. For those of you that have followed the channel for some time, you might be wondering why you're not seeing my face at the start of this video chatting to you, and I do have a fair reason, which I'll save until the end of the video. Remember to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy watching, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Starting us off at number 5 with the classic Jaguar XJS, which I actually mentioned in a video I made over a year ago now. Though there are a few V12 options, the 5.3 litre V12 is well within our price range, putting out 291 brake horsepower through its rear wheels, and though it's quite hard to work out based on numerous competing sources, does 0 to 60 in around 7 seconds. The XJS gets the majority of its torque at low revs, which you'd think would massively help with reliability, but it's not really the case. Even when new in the late 1970s and early 80s, the XJS had a poor reputation for reliability. In fact, it was described by Car Magazine at the time as £20,000 worth of trouble. That said, there are numerous specialists who deal with the XJS, so if you're in the market for a beautiful British classic car that will relieve you of some of your cash, you'll be in good hands. And that beauty point is one thing that would potentially get me to overlook the issues with reliability. It is such a great looking, maybe even iconic car. The side profile in particular is utterly magnificent and completely timeless. That said, having sat in one before, the space inside the car is quite cramped despite its size, so it's not necessarily the most comfortable classic you could go for. In my last video on this car I mentioned it's a good car to go for as a longer term investment, and from what I can see, even in the space of a year prices have increased since then. I was quoting £4,000 for a poorly maintained but running model this time last year. Now you're looking at around £5,000 for the same condition. £8,000 will get you one with a half decent service history and around 80,000 miles on the clock too, but remember that this is certainly not a car to be dailied given its reliability reputation. There are 2 cars on this list I'd personally consider buying for myself, and this is one of them. I think it is so good looking and would make an excellent project car, but despite that V12 being the key to this video, it must be said that I might consider swapping that engine for a newer Jag block for less long-term hassle. Otherwise it would be sitting in the garage collecting dust. Coming in at number 4 we have the E66 BMW 760Li, which hosts a 6 litre V12 that puts 438 brake horsepower through its rear wheels, taking it from 0 to 60 in around 5.4 seconds. Not bad at all for this sizable German saloon. This car was designed by the famous Chris Bangle, renowned for his bangle butt designs of BMWs, which have very much split opinion on aesthetics. I personally don't like the look of the 7 Series, it's a bit plain in my opinion, but feel free to ignore that if you like or own a 7 Series. I just think the bangle butt looks a lot better on the smaller cars, like the Z4 for example. Opinions aside, the 7 Series was originally designed to be a fastback before they moved towards the bangle butt. On the interior, there were more controversial design features like replacing the automatic gear selector in the centre console with cup holders, and putting a gear stalk behind the steering wheel instead. The e-brake is also controlled by a button on the dashboard, and the majority of controls were put on the dashboard as well. It basically seemed like BMW wanted to get everything in front of the driver. This, of course, drew a lot of criticism, as BMW have not been renowned for having particularly pretty interiors in the past, though I'd say they're doing a much better job now. It wasn't all criticism though. The 7 Series was the first to use the iDrive infotainment system, which centralised numerous car controls, making life quite pleasant for the driver. It also had numerous technologically advanced features to compete with the S-Class of the period, like the automatic soft closed doors and boot, as well as the 2 fibre optic networks to increase system speed within the car. I've seen these V12 7 Series listed for as little as £4,000 with high mileage, but £8,000 will grab you one with around 100 to 130,000 miles on the clock. Still pretty high mileage, mileage, but in terms of reliability, it's actually one of the better cars on this list. BMW knew they couldn't mess up with the 760Li, as it was a flagship car, so it's mostly been quite solid, though one common issue you might come across is the high pressure fuel pump system, which has caused a lot of headaches for owners on forums. Overall, this car is a solid choice for someone looking for a bit of a sleeper V12, as it has decent reliability and performance. Even if I'm not a fan of its looks, you might be, and more power to you if you go for one, as it's one of the more well-rounded cars on this list. On to the top 3 now, and in third place we have a range-topping second generation Audi A8, which hosts a 6-litre W12, and yes, I know it's not a V12, but it's pretty good regardless. This W engine puts out 443 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in around 4.9 seconds thanks to its all-wheel drive layout. For those of you that aren't aware, here's a brief and basic explanation of the difference between a V12 and a W12. A V12 has 12 cylinders in 2 lines of 6 separated by the crank, so 6 cylinders, crank, 6 cylinders, and it looks like a V shape when viewed from one side. A W12 has 2 sets of 2 lines of 3 cylinders separated by the crank, so 3 cylinders, crank, 3 cylinders, 3 cylinders. Hopefully that makes sense to you. The A8 was based on the VW Group D platform, and specifically the D3 platform, which is an aluminium space frame that shares its components with the steel opposite, the D1, that was used for the VW Phaeton and the Bentley Continental GT. Hence the Phaeton and A8 in particular look quite similar, and all 3 cars share the W12 block, just with the A8 having slightly more power and torque than the Phaeton, and the Continental having slightly more on top of that. The A8 was actually previewed in 2001 at the Frankfurt Motor Show by the Audi Avantissimo, and the production A8 included some of the tech features seen on that concept car. It had numerous innovations, including being the first Audi with adaptive air suspension, continuous damping control, GPS, DVD, 6-speed automatic, driver identification, and bi-xenon HID headlamps, so quite an important Audi. If you're looking for money to mileage ratio, this Audi wins it on this list. £8,000 will get you on with around 80,000 miles on the clock, way less than any other modern car mentioned on this list, while £5,000 will get you around the 100,000 mile mark. From what I can see on owners' forums too, the reliability is surprisingly good. Get on with 80,000 miles with a good service history and you'll be absolutely laughing. Remember that fuel economy isn't so great in this car however, as you can expect a maximum of around 19 miles per gallon, so your wallet may still take a hit, and anything that does go wrong will still be costly due to that engine. Overall though, the sensible individual watching this V12 video would probably buy this W12 instead. Lower miles, better reliability, lots of comfort for your money, all-wheel drive for any weather conditions, and overall just a solid choice of car. The one thing that lets it down is the fact that, in my opinion, it doesn't really set the world on fire in terms of its looks, and that's coming from a big Audi fan. Just missing out on the top spot by a technicality is the C215 Mercedes CL600, with both the 5.5 litre twin turbocharged V12 and the previous 5.8 litre naturally aspirated V12. The former puts out a whopping 500 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, while the latter puts out 367 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 6.4. What's interesting about the CL600 is that it isn't an AMG model, despite it being possible to spec one to basic AMG standards when the car was released. This is because Mercedes wanted to drive the sales of their CL55 AMG, meaning the CL600 was actually described as a much more reserved car despite its V12, and the suggestion that it is both faster and more powerful in reality. The only thing you might really get from the CL55 over the CL600 is the noise. The CL600 is supposedly a lot quieter. Though many people rave about the S-Class having some of the best technology available, the CL class at the time also benefited from the latest Mercedes tech, including active body control, active suspension, and a bunch of computers to keep the car flat through corners. It also came with numerous features as standard that were considered luxury at its time, but it was also a highly specable car, so consider your spec whenever you're looking to buy one of these. Maybe you want the heated seats or steering wheel or whatever. If you opt for the slightly older 5.8 litre V12 CL600, you'll also benefit from active cylinder control, whereby you can shut off half the cylinders and turn the car into an inline 6 for better fuel economy on motorway driving. This was scrapped on the newer CL600, though I couldn't find a reason why, and it's something we see today in modern cars. You can pick up a 5.8 litre CL600 for as little as £4,000 if you're willing to go for a very high mileage example, but £8,000 will get you a twin turbo model with just under 100,000 on the clock. Still quite high on the mileage, but not awful considering money to cylinder ratio. In terms of reliability, one common issue between the two cars to be aware of is the coil packs, which would cost me around £25 in my Polo, but will cost you a minimum of around £750 in the V12. Definitely not something you want to deal with. Particularly with the 5.5 litre bi-turbo M275 engine, however, reliability doesn't seem too bad going by owners' remarks on forums. Transmission issues seem more common, as well as electrical issues related to the sound system and climate control, and the suspension bushes and ball joints wear relatively easily, so be wary of this. Overall though, a very nice Mercedes for the money. I've said it in a previous video, I really like the pillarless look on these Mercs, it just has a really clean vibe to it. Of the cars on this list, this is also the other of the two that I would personally consider. Taking the top spot in this video is a car with the same engine as the previous car, the W12 S600L, with the M275 5.5 litre twin turbocharged V12 that puts out 500 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. Even though this also had the 5.8 litre V12 prior to 2003, the 5.5 litre model comes out much cheaper in the S range than the CL range, hence I've put it at number 1. In many of my videos I mentioned the S-Class as being the flagship car of the Mercedes range, but this S-Class differs slightly. Usually S-Classes are given the honour of spearheading the new design theme for the next generation of Mercedes, but the W220 was actually the second car to have the new look bestowed upon it, after the W168 A-Class. I imagine if cars had feelings, the W220 would not be best pleased. It did, however, receive new innovations for the time, as is the norm with the S-Class, such as airmatic air suspension, active ventilated seats and keyless entry. Furthermore, it still had a refined styling process, as it was based on the F200 concept that was revealed in 1996 as a preview. In addition to this, it was a bit of a beast. Car and Driver pitted a 5.5 litre bi-turbo S600L against the Ferrari 575M Maranello, which also has a V12, and found that the Merc was faster in a quarter-mile drag by a tenth of a second. Not bad at all for a saloon. Though these Mercs are quite rare, you can still pick one up for around the £6,000 mark, with quite high mileage, but as with the CL, expect around 100,000 miles on the clock for your £8,000. There aren't many on sale right now, so it's worth waiting to find the right one. I won't labour the reliability point as the M275 engine has been discussed with the CL class. What I will say though is that it can cost a lot to maintain, and can be very difficult to work on, as the V12 completely fills out the engine bay, so removing and replacing parts can be tough and require specialist help. It's basically the case that this engine is generally reliable, but if it does go wrong, be prepared to dip into your wallet. I have really come to appreciate the S-Class since starting this channel, and I think it's cool that Mercedes have tried to push the boundaries of car tech throughout the history of this series of car. It may be a little bit out of date by today's terms, but the S600L does have that whopping V12 under the bonnet to give you some enjoyment. So in this video I've walked you through the top 5 cheapest cars with V12 engines. Let me know in the comments if I've missed any, and don't forget the topic of the week. In terms of why you're not seeing my face in the intro or outro, is because on the day of making this video I've had an operation, so I'm not in a presentable state, as you can see here. Don't worry, I'm absolutely fine, just don't fancy looking like a pirate on camera. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, all that great stuff, but as always thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.